Welcome to episode 40 of Rubbish Talk with myself, Alistair Meldrum.
And myself, Jane Bond.
And today we have, our guest is Nick Noble, who is the CMO of Danu Robotics. So, as usual, more about Nick later on. But first of all, any news in the world of waste, Jane?
Oh, loads of news, Alistair. Another battery fire, Enver. And battery recycling facility at Linwood in Renfrewshire was hit by a major fire on Sunday night, 23rd of June. So, yeah, there seems to be a lot going on then. No injuries. Source of the fire subject of an immediate and thorough investigation, Enver said. But, a wee and battery recycling facility doesn't take much to draw some conclusions from that one. I was in Paisley on the Monday morning and you could smell the fire. Yeah, it must have been horrible for residents nearby.
You say no injuries, but some of the locals, I think, were taking their life in their hands a little bit and filming from the fences as these batteries were shooting into the air, which was not some of the videos that are out there were pretty scary in terms of them taking a chance. But it just goes back to this. We need to sort batteries. So somebody was telling me about batteries the other day, that the way the battery compliance scheme works is the people that place the batteries on the market estimate the weight, and obviously they use the lowest estimate. And then the people that recycle estimate the weight and obviously use the highest estimate. So in theory, the UK's got like a massive recycling rate. But in practice, that doesn't match up what we've got. So it's really hard for companies to invest in setting up these plants and do it properly and so on. So there's something needing looked at in the whole battery sector in terms of actually putting the money into recycling the batteries and recovering the materials.
Yeah, how these the battery legislations work and everything like that, and how it doesn't necessarily do what it's supposed to do.
It seems to be an open secret. It's not working, and it's not worked for 10 years, and nobody seems to be doing anything about it. So you never know. Maybe with all these fires, we'll do something. But there was actually another fire at the weekend there, Green Gear's landfill site, which was my first landfill site I was ever on in my life, which is based just to the west of Coatbridge. It had a pretty significant fire on the landfill over the weekend. I believe it is now out, but some of the drone footage is quite impressive.
Yeah, the drone footage, it looks like some kind of like volcanic eruption or something.
Yeah. Well, the challenge with landfills is generally the way to get them out. It's not with water; it's to smother them. But the big danger is you drive the fire into the waste and then they burn away forever. So it can become really dangerous. So if you ever go to Malta on your summer holidays, most of the landfill sites in Malta are actually on fire and have been for numerous years.
Well, it's like incineration, isn't it? Let's burn the waste. When we get rid of it.
Anyway, and on brighter news, Scotland finally managed to pass the Circular Economy Bill. When was it? 27th of June. It passed.
Yeah, really recently.
So there's a whole mixed mash of things, but one of the exciting things is the councils and enforcement agencies will be able to apply a civil penalty on vehicle owners for littering. So if something pops out the side of a car, they can fine the owner rather than having to identify the driver, which I think will make a massive difference. A couple of other things involved, Jane. I think you picked out the unsold goods disposal.
Yeah, that's right. Restrictions on unsold goods disposal and making sure that if anything's I'm not quite sure, and you probably need to have a look on that one as well. But unsold goods, because there's so many, like branded goods and things like that. Does it include those? Does it include clothes? Does it include textiles? There's so many branded things that, end of line or, not summer colours anymore or whatever, that then get shredded or taken to landfill or energy from waste. Does that mean that we can stop that? It can actually go to be used rather than being destroyed.
That's the theory, I think. That's
I hope so.
So I suppose it's to stop companies order, if they don't sell, they'll not resell because it lowers their market if it's to stop them doing that. And there's other things involved, local recycling targets and some support investment, but I think there's a bit more detail to come.
And the charges on more single-use items as well, with coffee cups and things being the targets.
I want them just to ban the use of single-use products in a cafe or a restaurant.
Yeah,
I don't know why
absolutely.
we can't have that. Just ban that in a place. So you can't have a disposable cup in a cafe. You've got to use a china or a glass or whatever. But you never know. You never know. We might get that might come through. So.
Because that was on. Did you see Laura Young's LinkedIn post? She put a link. Laura Young, who was on a while back. Her LinkedIn post was on Dundee. I think it was Dundee Uni. She'd taken a video to say there was a coffee outlet selling coffee, obviously in disposable cups, and right next to it was all the chairs and tables and things where people were sitting outside, and then all the coffee cups in the bin. And she was like, well, why couldn't they have done reusable ones, because it's right close to it anyway? So yeah, I was looking at that as well.
Well, the good one I heard that I actually shared in my LinkedIn was Mossgiel Dairy. I think that's how you pronounce it, right? Which is a dairy in Ayrshire. So it's a group of 5 farms, and they try to compete with the big dairy people. So they've managed to get the contract to supply milk to East Ayrshire schools. And they did it, rather than doing it by glass bottles or plastic bottles, they did it by a vending machine.
Oh, right, okay.
So they did a big post about that. So I'm sure we can share the link of it. And they're doing some quite interesting stuff. You actually read their stuff, they're doing some stuff quite interesting where they actually keep the cow and the calf together, and they still get the milk.
Okay.
From a welfare side of things. So there's some really interesting stuff they've been trying to do in terms of changing the way with, try to get people to eat locally and farm locally and all that sort of stuff. So interesting stuff.
Yeah. What else have we got? New CIWM president, Chartered Institute of Waste Management president.
Tim Walker from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, he was at ARC21. I don't know. I think he's ARC21 CEO. So he has put out a call for better design to reduce waste, which, yeah, I mean, that's the right way of doing it, isn't it? Address the role of design and development in the creation of stuff. So that actually you look at it right at the very beginning to see how you can design for recycling, I guess, or reuse or recovery. So anyway, watch that space, see how he gets on.
Yeah, I've not had a chance to. What's the report called? Turning off the tap.
Turning off the tap. Why better design can increase resource resilience and reduce consumption.
I've not had a chance to read it. I'll need to have a look. Like all these things, it's on the increasing to-do list. The one I did open, but again, I never actually read many of the words, but I just looked at the pretty pictures, was the review of enforcement of litter and fly tipping offences final report. So this was a research report commissioned by the Scottish Government 2022, completed by Anthesis in autumn 2023, and it's finally just been published, so almost a year later. But when you actually go through it and you look at the pretty pictures and the pretty graphs, there's not much good reading in it. So they pretty much graphed things like fly tipping cases since 2011 to current. And the graphs in 2011, the figures weren't great. You're only talking about 19, 20 people being prosecuted. Now we're down to a whole 0 people being prosecuted.
And it's not like it's getting better, is it?
No, it's certainly not getting better. It's certainly on a downward spiral. It was already a fairly poor starting point, but it's on a downward spiral. So sometimes I wonder I know we've got a litter strategy, but I do wonder if we're going to make any sort of progress with it unless we start thinking the things a bit differently.
But then we've got our circular economy bill, and vehicle keepers will face fines if litter is dropped from their vehicles. But who's going to enforce it?
Well,
we may have this legislation, but if it doesn't get enforced, then it's not really a deterrent, is it?
Well, I was somebody made a point to me very recently, probably on LinkedIn, said we're very, very good at putting legislation in place. We're very, very poor at actually working out how to enforce it and actually put it in practice. And this is another sort of example. But you never know with the new, certainly with the vehicles. I'm sure it's not beyond the wit of man nowadays to have cameras. Pick up the registration number and pick up somebody chucking someone out the window.
Yeah.
That may act as a deterrent. So
I can just see George Niblock going around with his camera and stuff, sorting them out.
Yeah, I'm sure that there's 140 pages to the report, and I'm sure George has had a wee nosy through. But it is very much a factual report of gathering up the data, which is actually good. So I probably should have a better look at it. And maybe what we should be doing is, rather than slagging off litter all the time or approach litter, is we should maybe be reaching out to somebody like KSB and try and get somebody like them on the podcast as well, and hear it from their side of the story to see what they're trying to do. So that's maybe something we need to sort out.
Have we got any Albion news, Alistair? Or...
Well, I've had, as you know, I've hardly been here. I've been skiving again. So
another holiday.
I am just back. I better not tell John Ferguson my carbon footprint's ridiculous at the moment. But I was in Croatia, and as per every other country I've been to recently, the beach was spotless, the pavements were spotless, the whole place was spotless, and there was hardly a scrap of litter. And the place was packed. And you do have to sort of wonder how these countries manage it, and we seem to fail to be able to do that. It was an interesting place actually. It seemed to be full. Where I was staying was it was lots of different cultures, but there were so many expectant mums there. You had to see many expectant mums around here, but over there, every place you looked, there was lots of pregnant ladies. So
be something in the water.
It must have been, or someplace from where they came from, or whatever. I don't know.
Are you sure you were in the right holiday? Perhaps you were in the holiday for expectant mums or something.
I maybe was, but it was noticeable, and I think it's one of these things. Once you actually notice something, you then just start seeing more and more. So the most excitement I had there was I managed to climb the second highest mountain in Croatia. So that was a sea to summit, something like 6,000 feet, which was quite nice and quite warm.
Did you just climb it because it was there?
Just because it was there, literally right behind the beach, so it had to be done from the sea to the summit. Anything
else on your holiday?
No, I think that was that. There was a weird thing about gents' toilets there that was bizarre, but that's maybe not for the part.
Maybe not for this. Okay, fair enough. So
it was just a layout. The layout was just not quite. It was a bit strange.
Okay. So we had me and Susan in the office. We went for a trip last Friday, and we went to Glasgow City Chambers. We'll be able to tell you more about that in the next podcast. But I tell you, what an amazing place inside the chambers. It's just beautiful.
I had a bit of a flashback when you shared the pictures, because I was there when I was very young, like, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, and I remember it vividly because it was that impressive a building.
Well, I'd taken a photograph of the stairs and everything, and I mean, you can do tours around the city chambers as well. And I sent it to my mum, and she was like, "Oh wow, it looks like Harry Potter stairs. It looks like they're going to move at any point."
I never knew you could do tours. I never knew
that. Yeah, there is tours. There's tours around it as well.
And somebody guides you around.
Yeah. You can take a guided tour. I think was it not built by or money from the tobacco barons or something like that? Yeah. So the other thing we had was, I think we kind of mentioned it last week, didn't we? About that last time was about the RMAS visit. We had people around to our office, and we had to all be on our best behaviour and tell everybody what we did. It was great, actually. I think we had about 9 stations, and we had all members of staff telling people who came around what they did and what we did in this area. I think we had, what did we have? We had contaminated land, we had consultancy stuff, we had monitoring, we had waste composition analysis, we had the My Bins app. What else did we have?
We had bioaerosols.
Bioaerosols.
We had the WAMA tab in the training.
WAMA tab in the training, and I got the odds and sods that, ADR, clinical waste.
You just made up as you went along, but you decided you didn't like your topic to start with.
I know, I didn't. So, but yeah, so I had the other bits that were left over. But it was good. We had some good chat. Good people there.
I think it was good. It was good to have people at the office. We quite rarely have people at the office, and it was actually quite. I think what was interesting was we only picked a number of things. We probably could have done easily 20 different things that we do. So it was actually good to sort of pull everything out, pull all the equipment out, and just showcase what we do. So quite happy if anybody's interested in what we do. Doing maybe not something similar unless we get the numbers, but just having a chat with people about what we can do and going through it. So, and we were this close to being able to show off our new solar panels and Tesla battery, weren't we? But it wasn't quite connected then. It was 2 days away from getting connected. So it is now connected. And if the weather would stop being so crap. So I think we were fully solar powered over the weekend. We're certainly not fully solar powered today because it's all cloudy. But no, it's good. But I think with the solar, you definitely need the battery backup to make it worthwhile.
And the sun.
And the sun would help as well. But that'll hopefully happen at some point. So no,
it was quite impressive. You've got a wee app on your phone, haven't you, which tells you what.
Oh, the app's really impressive. Because I now know when people have not turned their monitors off in the office.
We have the monitor police.
So I now know when the monitors have been left on standby, which is surprising the difference. Just turning them properly off compared to being on standby makes a big difference.
Interesting.
And just shows you simple things. We can all reduce our consumption. So I think that's us, Jane.
I think so.
So over to our guest, as I said earlier, Nick Noble, who is the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of Danu Robotics. They're a new company to the sector, but they've got some really exciting ideas in terms of what they're trying to do. Nick had a journey from Glasgow Art School all the way through to the high point of his career, which is designing robots to sort waste. He's only been in the waste industry for about a year, so he feels a bit like a newcomer, but loads of knowledge and experience of all things IT and electronic and robots. So hopefully you enjoy myself and Jane try to work out what the hell his equipment does and how it does it. So over to Nick.
Hi, Nick. Welcome to Rubbish Talk. And how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Good. Well, it's nice to see you and hear you and talk to you about your experiences. So to start off, who do you currently work for, and a bit of background about the organisation and what you do and that kind of thing would be quite useful.
Okay, thank you. Well, I work for Danu Robotics, which is one of the 2 UK manufacturers of waste sorting robots. You probably know the other one. We're just new to the market, based in Edinburgh at the National Robotarium, which is a fantastic place on the Heriot-Watt campus. We first came into contact with these guys. I was a mentor at a tech accelerator in Glasgow that deals with Internet of Things companies, hardware companies. And Amy Marr, who's the founder, was one of the people on the program. And I just found her business really compelling. I gave her a bit of a hard time, and then after my contract came to an end, she said, "Nick, can you come and do all those things that you were telling me to do?"
I know it's a bit harder, Nick, is it?
Yeah, a bit of a bully. I must stop there. And I've just immersed myself in the waste industry since September. So I'm probably the least experienced of anybody listening to this podcast, which might be an interesting perspective.
I'm interested in that robotarium. What was it? Robotarium? I can't even say it.
Robotarium, yes. It's a wonderful very new building with a, you walk in, a wonderful reception with a robot whale in it. I mean, what's not to like?
A
Wow.
robot what?
A whale.
Whale.
Yeah, a robot whale. And there's androids and cyborgs all over the place.
Does it do that thing, when you see on the telly and the robot comes up and says, "Do you want a drink?" or something like that, or "Can you tell me your name and I
Those
will take."
robots are in the building. Yes.
Really, how cool
Yeah.
is that? So when you say about robots that sort waste, how does that work?
Yes. So that's the picking arm. So there's actually three parts to the system. There's the optics and the sensors. So you might have sensors that can detect batteries in waste, or mainly optical sensors that outline the shape of an object, and then the AI looks across its database and works out what it is, and it sends a message to the robot arm that picks it up and puts it in a chute. That's essentially what it does. The hardest part, I think, has been, the AI, it sounds like it's the hardest part, but it's machine learning rather than deep learning, which is the really fancy stuff. The hardest part is actually making a robot arm that's cost effective, because there's an awful lot on the market that costs you £250,000. But what I liked about Amy's proposition is that she's aiming to become the default in the industry. She's aiming to be more efficient than a human, to be that, and of that scale. So you could have this team of robots around a conveyor belt, picking all the material. One's picking plastic, one's picking aluminium, one's picking vapes, one's picking paper, that sort of thing, and reducing that footprint, but doing it in the most cost-effective way. Because it's got, we all know each other in the industry. We know it's all about the cost of things and the efficiency. So there's things like, one of the big things we're trying to change is an acknowledgement of that the metric is how many picks per day can you get out of X, whether it's a human or a robot system, because that's an operational metric, not a robot metric. Yes, so sorry, off on a bit of a tangent there. But that's just one of the things that Amy's big ambition is trying to change. We want to be the default.
That's quite I was going to say that's quite interesting. It's not just about, to be honest, it's totally wider than that though, isn't it? It's about the people, but it's also about the health and safety implications. Absolutely. And Absolutely. Everything like that. And you've got 4 or 5 people picking, it's not the nicest of jobs by any means.
That's a horrible job.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I'm all for protecting jobs, but this really is a horrible job, and it's just getting more dangerous. It's antisocial, it's cold and dirty. I had an incredible quote from when in the research phase, which I did for a few months. I spoke to one of the MRFs down south, and I said, do you have any HR issues with the manual picking? And the 3 directors all laughed, and they said, Nick, last year we did 400 new employee inductions to maintain 16 jobs.
Yeah.
200 would turn up, say, I'm not doing that, and leave. Nobody wants to do it, and it's not even that efficient. If you can have if a robot can do the same thing as a human's doing, and it does it relentlessly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and it counts everything it picks, so we tag into the whole EPR regulations. It's measuring everything that it does. Why wouldn't you want to do that? If the cost was right, if the price was right.
I suppose it's a big upfront cost, isn't it? And then you balance that against how, what you would spend on revenue, what you would spend on operational costs all the way through the year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and say, right, okay, well, you can balance one against the other.
Well, I didn't want this to be a sales pitch, but our 2-arm system that can retrofit in about 1 meter of conveyor belt is 60k. Now that's not a huge capex cost, especially when a Delta robot might cost you £250,000.
So if those 2 arms will go across, and those will pick 2 different types of materials, presumably. Yeah. So I'm thinking of a little robot like you know, we talked about Wall-E, you know, in that film, and he's there with all his stuff trying to recover all his scrap and everything like that. So they're not robots like that, are they? They're just like
No,
arms.
if you took one of Wally's arms off and limited the amount of axes that it ran off, and then you hung it from a gantry, so
it would be like that,
a very limited space that it moved in.
Mm-hmm.
It literally picked off the robot into the bin, off the robot into the bin, and the bin was very close to where it was, so it wasn't traveling very far. That's what our robots look like.
Oh, perfect. And that would be really, you know, we've had more fires, haven't we, in the waste industry just recently on our batteries and vapes, and oh, this is what we think anyway. And if we have something like that that can actually really pick out batteries from everything else, that would be just ideal.
Yeah, I mean that's where, you know, back to the front end of the system, all the sensors. There are companies, quite a few companies, who are developing sensors to detect the batteries, but you've still got to pick them. You know, if you've got a vape the size of a pen in amongst all that dry mix recyclable, you need a very fine grip, a very fine. You almost need a kind of 3-finger, very fine picker, a gripper, to actually pick out of the mix. You can't do it with a vacuum. You can't blow it out. It's not, you know, it's partially magnetic but mainly plastic. So that fine grip is what you absolutely need. So that's, you know, the system we've got will have a variety of grippers. You can change the gripper in about 10 minutes. It's like the hand on the arm. So you can change the hand for a fine gripper or a heavy duty gripper. So that team could have potentially 8 different grippers for 8 different materials.
Do you know what I'm thinking? I've got this image of my head, as you know, when you go to the on the pier and you get these great things that you go and there's a big teddy bears and stuff like that, and you have to sort of like
they've been designed so you don't win, Jane.
That's just what came into my head then, and I thought that really isn't the right type of gripper you want.
It's not that dissimilar, actually.
I've got so many questions being like that, and the list of questions we sent you. How does it cope with, you know, obviously a battery is a battery, but a battery that's been battered through waste is not always recognizable as a battery. How does it cope with that sort of, or even, you know, a plastic bottle, you know, a Coke can's a Coke can, but then it can be a crushed Coke can. How does it cope with all these different variations that exist in the waste?
Well, I mean, that's where we are collaborating. For instance, there's a number of companies that have sensors that detect the electrical signal, I believe. So, you know, we're not going to reinvent the wheel. They know what they're doing, but we can incorporate that sensor into our array. So it's not just the optical system; it's also maybe the infrared these battery sensors. Then it's just a matter of, you know, the AI identifying that object from its bank of its database and saying that's a vape, pick it. And it sends that message to the arm, and it just picks it up and puts it in the special bin. There's another fascinating one that came out of that's again back to the EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Regulations. There's a wonderful company called Polytag, who have developed a system where you UV print on a bottle, like a Coke bottle, 30 identical QR codes, and then if that bottle is scrunched up, you can always see one of those QR codes from a UV sensor. So it means that bottle is tracked, or can be tracked, from manufacturer to distributor to retailer to consumer to council pickup to the MRF. When it gets to the MRF and it's on that conveyor belt, they lose it. Now that's where we come in, because we have a little data integration. We pick up that identification of that bottle and we send that message to our claw. You know, it picks it up and puts it in the special bin for, say, Coca-Cola food grade plastic bin, and that bin is 100% purity food grade plastic that can be, you know, straight off to the reprocessor to be ground up. You know, the accuracy is fantastic. But we're collaborating with that company. You know, we know what we do and we know what we don't do, and you know, know when to collaborate.
That's incredible. My other question, Nick, I was going to ask you was so if you could you, for example, have a line where you've got, I don't know, 8 robots and you've got them all programmed to collect whatever waste. Can you then switch them to look for something different? could you do a day shift in one material type and then switch them to look for totally different materials at night? Is it just
you could have
as simple as switching a switch or reprogramming them, or how does that work?
I'm not sure yet, because we're at the early stage. We only have a single pair of arms available. The 8-arm system will probably be available in Q1, Q2 next year, where you just modular, add another pair, add another pair, add another pair. But the plan is that each one of those arms can pick a different material, because it's one arm to one bin. It's not one arm that can put 7 different materials in 7 different bins. They have a small throw, so they just reach out, pick their can or bottle or whatever, put it in their bin. But 8 arms, 8 bins, 8 different materials. And yes, you could have 5 on plastic and 2 on aluminium and 1 on vape, and then you get a load that comes down that is all cans. So you just relatively quickly reprogram them to all work on cans.
That's quite impressive, isn't it? It's quite fascinating how it could work. One of the things we've always got in MRFs as well, materials recycling facilities at the end, or materials facilities now, at the end, is doing the analysis of the material at the end. So they've just put out new guidance, new information on how you monitor and what you take for analysis. Is that something eventually the robots could do?
Absolutely. I think there's a huge case for saying, do you need to do sampling? Because if you're measuring as you're picking, every single item that's picked is identified before it's picked, is identified when the claw clasps it, picks it off the conveyor, and is identified again when it drops it into the bin. So that's 100% accuracy of this is what it is, this is picked up, and this is it dropped in the bin. Well, if you have that data and it's real-time data, then somebody remote could be looking at data from not every single MRF they have, but every single robot array down to every single robot, exactly what it's picking. You can have that available to send over to SEPA or whoever instantly.
Sorry, on you go, June.
I was going to say, because we do a lot of waste composition work for local authorities and things like that, and they're wanting us to sort through a massive amount of waste. We were looking at one the other day, and it was looking at about 7 tons of waste over 2 days, and you're like, really? So the actual resources for that is really high, and I don't think people realize how much resources it takes to pick or sort of analyze, search through a load of waste and separate it. So could that be set up as a robot array or something like that? And how quick could it do it?
I don't know how quick. I'm not qualified to answer that one, but you touched on a very interesting aspect of this, because our footprint is so small, and if you have a team of, say, 8 robots, that's potentially in 4 meters of conveyor belt. That becomes almost like a MRF in itself. If it's picking across the whole of the DMR mix, you could attach that, say, in a hospital, or you could attach it at an airport or a shopping precinct, and you could pick the waste almost at source. If it's a small unit, and I imagine the kind of waste you get at a food waste, contaminated food waste at a shopping precinct, if you pick it relatively quickly, it's a lot less mushed up and contaminated than if you wait 3 days and then try and sort it. Potentially the robots could change the nature of where and when you do the sorting, which I think is quite exciting, especially a country like Scotland, where we have a lot of small communities.
Yeah, that's going back to our wee pipe dream, Jane, is having a container mounted waste analysis sorting equipment that would turn up with a trailer
and all you do is shove all the waste in one end, and out of the other end you'd get your results, which would say this tons of plastic, this amount of film, this amount of glass, this amount of whatever. So it's
exciting, isn't it?
And I take it, obviously, Nick, there's sort of technical challenges to what you're trying to do, but I'm assuming you're trying to use existing technologies that are already out there and sort of merge them together. And I think I would imagine one of the critical things is speed. The faster these robots can work, because generally with recycling facilities, it's throughput. It's how much tonnage can we get through in an hour type thing.
It's an interesting one. I would replace speed with consistency and reliability. So they're no faster than a human at the moment, but then they're relentless. They're 24/7. They never stop. They just keep on going, and they're just as accurate when they start as they are 24 hours later. That's hugely important. And if the cost is right, if a pair of arms is only, because the subsequent ones are 50k, if it's only 50k to add another arm, rather than spending £250,000 on a faster robot, why don't you just have 8 consistent, reliable, relentless robots that can pick across a mix? It's a different way of looking at it. It's less robot centric and more operational centric.
It was quite interesting. Like I met my son yesterday, who is a chemical engineer, and he's working for a company that makes silicon wafers. And their process, it's quite an old factory he's in, and their process manually takes the wafers from one bit of the plant to the next bit of the plant and so on. And I was saying to him, I said, come on, you need to get up to speed. The waste sector's using robots. You need to. And the example he was saying was all the different plants worldwide that make the same things as them are all using robot. They're using robot arms to move the wafers along. So it's quite fascinating that there are industries that have used robots for quite a while, and the potential in the waste sector is quite significant, I think.
I think so.
Yeah, it's a mix with the AI, which I don't quite understand, because you were talking about earlier. Talking about, I'm sure you said about Internet of Things.
Yes.
That we were probably actually just before we were chatting actually, and that's something that to me is just like something up in the air. I have no idea how it works. You put things in a black box, and all of a sudden, something comes out the other end. So, in terms of AI, how does that work? How does that program? What does that do?
I've always been fascinated by this. Well, I've always worked in technology, even though I'm actually an art school graduate. I went to Glasgow School of Art. But I spent 3 years at IBM working for the Watson team, which was the original, or one of the original AIs. And so I got to work on some fantastic projects and absolutely remarkable projects. But I remember a quote, whenever the subject goes a bit Terminator, when people say, robots take over the world, AI is going to kill us all. I come back to Gary Kasparov, because Gary Kasparov, world #1 chess player, and IBM ruined his life by beating him with an AI, sort of an AI. And a few years later, he said, human and machine beats human or machine every time. Always has, always will. So it's not the AI that's going to take your job. It's the other guy who's using AI who's going to take your job.
Yeah.
Once you get that, it's not scary anymore. It's just evolution. It's just, technological evolution. There's 2 parts to AI, machine learning and deep learning. So machine learning is you give it this sort of brain vast amounts of data, and it learns patterns. It's got a pattern recognition. And so, I know what that is because I've seen 10,000 pictures of it. So I identify it. And it does it in microseconds. The deep learning is the really interesting bit, because that means it learns with every decision it makes. And that is absolutely fascinating and a little bit scary. But we're not there. We're definitely.
Do you know what I find amazing is one of the guys who works for Albion, he went on a course about AI, and he came back and he was like, yeah, you've got to do this, you've got to look at this, look at that, look at the other. We started looking at it, and I was like, wow, this is so good. I can just put a load of bullet points in and tell it to write me a story about it. And I was like, that is yeah, although I did ask it did and give me quite a few references, and I went back to it and I said, is this a real reference? And they went, hey, we can't find that reference. So I was like, you know.
Still needs that human interaction.
Still needs human plus machine. You were right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So anyway, going back, we've diverted into robots for the last 10 minutes. Going back to the sort of question, we normally ask people how they get involved in the waste management, and you sort of mentioned that you're a fairly recent person into it. Yeah. I'll twist the question slightly. What's your thoughts since you've only been in the waste industry for a year or so? What's your thoughts when you've come into it? What's your, you've always been in tech for years.
Yes.
What was your immediate thought when you got into the waste sector?
Well, I think it proved a point to me that there are some industries that look really interesting from the outside, and they're really not. I mean, I worked in the computer graphics and computer gaming industry for about 8 years. It's not as interesting as you think. It really isn't. And I always think this is more interesting. It certainly has more impact in a positive way. When you think of the challenges of the global warming and the amount of plastic waste that's choking the world, that we have an opportunity to address that and to reverse it. How can you not get excited about that? How can you not be inspired by that? Producing just another shoot 'em up computer game doesn't compare. So it's all about the way you look at things, and the stories you tell. A story I've often repeated. There's a brilliant Scots professor called David Macmillan who won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry. So your son will probably come across him. And he said when he in his acceptance speech for the Nobel Prize, he said, growing up in Scotland, you learn how to talk and you learn how to tell a joke because you have to get to a punchline fast. And he said that is the reason for his success in chemistry, in worldwide deep, in research chemistry. He said, I happen to know how to tell a story. I get to the point very quickly. So you can communicate well. Yeah, technology is just how you look at things. And I find this business fascinating.
Perfect. So how did you go from an arts degree? It was an arts degree, you said, to getting into
design at Glasgow School of Art.
How did that morph into computers, IT, technology?
For my first job, I got a job down in Hertfordshire for a silicon company who made silicon chips, and then we designed. One of the guys there decided to make a digital radio, so we became the world's first manufacturer of digital radios. It's company's called Pure Digital.
Oh,
so
right.
they made
I've got.
I like their radios.
I've got a Pure radio, digital radio, actually. Yeah.
There you go. Well, that little wooden box with the speaker on the left and the dials on the right. That I co-designed that with a team there.
Oh, cool.
And that was a great ride. So I was there 8 years, and then I had my own startup, manufacturing again. It was in dust extraction. Actually, it was an invention. I won't go into that. Lasted 6 years. Learned an awful lot. Learned a lot. I mean, I was on season 1 of Dragon's Den. Would you believe?
Oh, really?
Yeah, got an absolute kicking.
That's nothing to being on episode 40 of Rubbish Talk. So now, come on.
That's right.
It's a lot more relaxing, I can tell you. I was meant to go up with the manufacturer of our product and my business partner, who was the technical guy. And one bottled it and the other one was out of the country. So I had all their notes on Post-it notes with me. And of course, that was a disaster. So I learned a lot from that one.
Is there still a link to that? Is there still a link to it?
Can we still watch that?
Well, if it was, I'm not going to tell you. Absolutely.
We'll need to track that down.
Yeah. I was then in Scott's agency business, and then I worked for Salesforce for nearly 4 years as the lead strategist, and then I jumped over to IBM to work for the AI in the AI team and marketing again, and then I joined the Tech Accelerator. So it's technology is the thing that links all the experiences, but it's essentially design, marketing, and business development, telling stories.
So out of all these roles, or even just restricting to your waste roles, any favourite journeys, projects you've done over the years?
Well, I think IBM Watson was probably the most fascinating. When you're applying. So, for instance, IBM do grand challenges. Gary Kasparov at chess was one of them. They then built Watson to win a game called Jeopardy, a TV show. The one that I was working on when I left, the last one was Project Debater, where they created an AI that would verbally debate any subject so well that it went up against the world debating champion live on stage in America, and it was narrowly defeated on the subject of childhood education. It's given 10 minutes and it has to debate, and it tells jokes, it pauses, it takes the piss, it hesitates, it has to engage the audience. So it's not just a kind of robot voice, it literally is really engaging. That was fascinating. And what we did with that was, when COP was in Glasgow, we were going to debate, we were going to obviously debate the big subject about climate warming, but we're also going to open up the debate by debating the nature of what it is to be human. And we were going to debate the value of play. And it was going to be sponsored by Lego. I mean, how can you not get excited about that?
Yeah, whammed.
Live on stage, debating the nature of play with an AI that can debate with you. Fantastic. At COP, and then use that, when you had people's attention, use that to address climate change.
And did it happen? Yeah, did that happen?
No, unfortunately, it didn't. I left. I'd engaged the engineering team behind Project Debater, and they were very excited about doing it. And I got permission from Lego to sponsor it, because there's actually a Scottish teacher who's the director of play at Lego. He was a headmaster.
How cool is that?
So that's
what a great job title, director of play at Lego. Whoa.
Yeah. What little boy wouldn't want that job?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Like it.
Yeah, so that sounds like a really cool thing. So that sounds like a really good project. What about the worst thing? Have you had any really disasters or any funny stories that you've got?
Plenty of disasters. Well, I think, how can you top going on Dragon's Den and getting an absolute kick pasting?
Fair enough.
The funny thing is, I knew what was coming. I had 10 minutes of very positive kind of debate, and one of the guys was very interested, and the other four just kind of they were licking their lips. They were just going for it. They were trying to get me to lose my rag and make some compelling television. So that was a really horrible moment. And I did actually get recognised by cab drivers.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You were the guy who didn't quite make it on Dragon's Den. Yeah, that must be so hard. I see it so many times when you go in and they ask you all these really difficult questions about finance and economics and all this sort of stuff, and the guy's like, "Oh, don't know about that one," but it works.
Yeah, I think, bringing it back to something really, really tangible, leaning into the waste again and the EPR regulations, and how is that going to change the industry? Because I have a vision of how I think it should be, and clearly I'm not as experienced, as I say, of anybody who's listening to this podcast. If you put something on the table, people will jump on it, and they will, if it's wrong, they will tell you it's wrong, and that's often the best way to get a response from somebody. So I've now, I had a fantastic meeting with the guys from CEPA, and I now know all about PRNs and PRENs and how that's going to work post, in 2025 with EPR, and will it change it? Will it change anything? So that again, I still find that interesting. The trading of PRNs. I didn't know that existed until 10 days ago.
And for our listeners who don't know, that's packaging recovery notes. And to be honest, it's all a bit of a mystery to me either. I think it's great, packaging recovery notes and all this sort of stuff, but it's quite complicated actually.
Yes,
I think this whole thing about extended producer responsibility, once these big companies have been made responsible for the packaging they put in the market, properly, I think they'll be looking at they'll want to control that. They'll want to know that they're paying for their waste and not other people's waste and so on. So I can see that the type of technology you're talking about in terms of scanners and codes and all the rest, that just accelerating, in the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I mean, with that barcode stuff you were talking about earlier, I mean, that, tracking it from birth to cradle to grave, as it,
I mean, that is a truly circular supply chain. You make the bottles, it goes all the way through all these different touch points, and it comes back to you as 100% pure, granules of your waste that you make back into bottles. And, a brand like Coca-Cola could make a serious value and profit from that story. To be able to say we are a circular manufacturing supply chain company, huge, absolutely huge.
Absolutely. You're probably a good person to ask this next question, because you're only a year in the waste industry. Do you think being involved in the waste industry, has that changed your opinion and the habit about waste since you've had some involvement? And do you feel you need to sort of practice what you preach and convert people a little bit, or were you already fairly aware?
Everybody who works at Danu is an environmentalist. I mean, Amy is an absolute confirmed environmentalist. When I joined, she would talk about the company being a circular economy company, and I said, it's not. You're a manufacturer of robots that just so happen to make a significant contribution to the circular economy.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to remember it's that way around. You make robots and you sell robots that do a job. Personally, I live in Fife. I have an electric vehicle. I have solar panels. I have underfloor heating. I have an air source heat pump. I have 2 home batteries. So I was already on that journey. Very passionate about that. But yeah, what personal thing have I changed? I've washed my bottles out a bit more.
They used to. What happens to them?
Well done.
Yeah. So Danu, you talked about the sort of environmentalists and all that sort of stuff, and we've looked at the waste side. So what else do they do? What was the other? Is this the main thing with the arms? Yeah.
That is absolutely it. They one of the issues with a number of other companies is that they take an off-the-shelf robot from a company in Japan, and then they repurpose it to pick waste. Well, that is an expensive way of doing things. What Danu have done is from scratch built a robot to pick waste. It does nothing else, and they've looked at the whole process. So, do you need a very expensive robot that can reach 6 feet over there and pick this, and then put that in that bin, and then this one in that bin, and that one in that bin, and everything and move around? You don't. The Danu robot, hangs above the waste and just picks the waste and puts it in a bin that's almost in its lap. It's a very short throw. That means it's very, very efficient. And because it's very efficient, it can be lean, and we can make it and sell it for that price that could change the industry. It all comes down to that price. We're not about producing the best robot in the world. We're about producing the robot that does the best job in the world. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
So short answer is no. It does nothing else apart from sort waste. But when you think about the waste we're putting through, I mean, at the moment it only does plastics and cans. But how many different types of plastic are there? I mean, the amount of times I've been told about that, apart from vapes, mastic tubes are the devil's work. Well, have one of those arms just picking out mastic tubes. The amount of the different types of waste is going to grow and grow and grow. So, I think, saying it just picks waste is hiding a lot of good stories.
I think we're only just touching. We're only just touching the whole recycling thing in the UK. We talk about recycling. Quite often we're not recycling. What we're doing is baling up single material types.
Yeah.
If you think of plastic, quite often companies are baling up plastic bottles. Now that'll be a mix of bottles. Somebody's then process it or separating them into separate bottles. Somebody else is granulating it. Somebody else is turning it into plastic. There's a whole chain there that we're not really touching on in the UK. We're just scratching the surface. Anyway, changing things around a wee bit. How do you all work no play, or do you get a chance to play?
Oh yes, I'm a big gardener and I play golf. You know, a guy of a certain age in Scotland. What else am I going to do?
Our last gardener was John Ferguson. He's a keen gardener as well. He's got an allotment.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I'm just down the road from the bin group.
So
Yeah.
what are you growing currently at the moment? What's going well?
Well, I live in Falkland, which, if you know it, it was famous for winning many years the Britain in Bloom competition.
Yes.
So and it's a glorious place. Ours is an ornamental garden. I don't grow any vegetables, not yet. I don't have the time for that, but I'll get around to it. So it's
all
roses.
flowers. Good.
And
what about the golf? What about golf? What's the handicap?
I haven't got a handicap. I've literally only just joined. I used to play in Glasgow at Cathcart Castle, and so I'm
just down the road from me.
All right, whereabouts are you?
I live in Eaglesham.
Oh, lovely! Another beautiful village.
Yeah, it is actually. It's lovely. And I'm quite jealous about your flowers. Actually, I tend to grow weeds. You know, and do you know what? What's really annoying about it is you weed all this thing, and then a week later they're all back again. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's
you have
never
to be
ending.
zen about it, though. I actually quite like weeding.
I just finished at the weekend there. I acquired some crushed CRT tubes from CCL, no, Destructor, after that last visit. So I managed to get myself some of their crushed CRT tubes that looks like a bit like aggregate. So I've now put that weed barrier down and put some of that down to try and cut down the amount of weeding I need to do in the garden. So that was my weekend's job.
I would love to see what that's like when the sun catches it. You know,
it's actually,
beautiful.
You know when it looks the best, and I hate to say this, when it's peeing it down with rain. That's when it looks best, because it goes all nice and clear. That's always when it looks best. I suppose in Scotland that means it's looking its best most of the time.
Yeah, you can't get away from that, can you? So where do you play golf? Like
Auckland.
Oh, is it nice course?
Yes, beautiful. Yes, nice 9-hole.
9 holes, my perfect. I started golf a while back, and I'm thinking, do you know what? I don't know how you do 18 holes. You know, I get bored after 9, and 9 holes for me is perfect. So yes.
You're not meant to play 9 twice to get the 18. Is that not what you're meant to do?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to have to do to get my handicap. Yeah, but it's also nice and it's nice and flat. So Cathcart Castle had a lot of big hills in it. Like Eaglesham.
I just found it really frustrating. One time you'd hit the most perfect shots, everything like that, and the next time you do the same thing, and it just like, you know, you'd end up 26 trying to get to this hole that you previously did it in 5. Yeah. And 5 was good for me. So anyway, what about your, you know, we've talked about all the robots and that kind of thing. So what do you see? Where do you see yourself with that? What you're trying to achieve for that, and what's next for you?
Well, it's definitely about scale. So, you know, we've said we're not interested in just selling, you know, 20 very expensive robots a year. We want to sell 2,000 inexpensive robots a year. You know, we want to change the industry. We want everybody to be using, it isn't just a kind of just all about us thing. It's almost like we want to have the Model T Ford of the robot world. You know, it's a great product at a great price. And so it becomes the default. You just have the hardware. You might have a different AI. But there's potential for that. But just those robot arms in that way, you just use the Danu ones. And that is, you know, we're going to do Scotland first. So we have some fantastic, you know, collaborations. You know, guys like Sireco and the Bin Group. You know, they're fantastically ambitious and innovative. So we want to work with those guys and really concentrate and make it the best that it can possibly be in Scotland. We are talking to all the big guys in the UK. The first product we delivered, which is being delivered right now, is in Portugal actually, but they came to us, they found us. So we want to get everybody in Scotland working really well and really efficiently with our arms, and then expand that to the UK, and then look at Europe. So, you know, we want to do it in a controlled fashion.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan, that one.
Hmm.
So what about one fact that
Hmm.
you'd like to share about your sector? There must be loads, because you've got quite a unique sector there, and there must be quite some interesting facts you've got that you can share with us.
I mean, I think that one about the 400 new employee inductions just to maintain 16 jobs, that's extraordinary.
That's pretty scary when you think of that going across. That'll be happening across the sector.
Yes. Yeah.
That'll not just be happening in one company. That's happening at most waste companies.
Yeah. And most of the waste companies tell me they put twice as many people on a shift because they know half of them won't turn up. And it's not,
Yeah.
and I don't believe that it's because it's down to the people. It is a horrible job. I don't think anybody would want to do it.
It's physically really hard work.
Yeah.
And
Physically just standing there.
Yeah, I learned about motion sickness as well. Apparently, a lot of people get motion sickness standing next to a moving conveyor.
Moving conveyor, wow.
Yeah, and they turn around and fall over.
I mean, we see that on a very, very small scale, don't we? With our waste composition analysis, it takes a while trying to get people. We've got obviously our sort of core team, and we bring other people in, and we sometimes see that they do a day and go, nah, I'm not coming back, and that's on a small scale.
I mean, I think there's work, like going back to that Gary Kasparov quote, working with robots, working with feeding the system, making sure the robots are working in the best possible way. There's a nice upgrade path for somebody in the industry to become a robot manager, a robot operator. That I think is really interesting. So anybody with the slightest bit of ambition or who wants to develop, that's exciting.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What's the thoughts? Obviously, your primary concern is to try and sell robots and get them out there. You're obviously going to provide the support to companies.
Yes.
What are they going to need to do in terms of, engineers to look after the robots or to program the robots? Are they going to have to upskill then in terms of their staff?
Not enormously. Amy's one of the best hires she did was a guy called Stevie, who's the operational head, and he spent as much as 30 years in operational engineering. So he might install 500 air conditioning units in a bank in Singapore. He knows how to make things work. And one of the things he changed about the design was he said this has got to be plug and play technology. This has got to be standard parts you can swap out very quickly. And the core bit, almost like the skeleton, the engineering is designed to last 20 years because it's not going to change that much. The thing that will change will be the AI and the software. So you license that, but you buy the hardware because that's not going to change.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Interesting. So moving on, we always ask a guest for their favorite piece of slang or dialect. It can either be from where they've grown up or lived, or it can be things they've come across that think, what on earth were these site guys talking to me about?
Well, there's two that I've used. They come from the marketing industry. One is if you ever have, in any kind of technology business, you have a marketing team and you have engineers, and they're very different people often. And if they don't talk to each other, you end up with marketing slogans like tomorrow's technology today. Now that's actually a line from an Alan Partridge episode. He was taking the piss, but it happens. If the marketers don't understand what the technology does and the engineers can't be bothered to explain it to them, you end up with rubbish like that. Okay, so that's one I keep coming back to. The other one is when I was working in a marketing agency and there was they were having to come up with a marketing campaign for a product that nobody particularly respected, and somebody said that you might have heard this before, that you can't polish a turd, but you can roll in glitter.
See the last bit again, so I think I laughed.
You did. I missed the last bit. You can't polish.
You need to say that again
but...
because I think I ruined it.
Yeah, they say you can't polish a turd, but you can roll it in glitter.
I've heard the first bit of that, but I've never heard the second of that.
That's the marketing industry. Basically, you say we can sell anything.
I like that one.
I like
That's
that
a good
one
one.
too.
That's a good one. So the other thing we give all our guests is we give you a magic wand. Talking about glitter and things, we give you a magic wand to do one thing for. It could be for the waste sector, or you could use it for your robots if you so wished. One thing you would love to be able to do.
It's very dry and very tactical. It's back to this metric. I want us to measure two things. I want us to establish a benchmark. This is something I'm working with Duncan Simpson on, which is to say, can we measure how many picks per shift an average manual worker can do? It's like establishing horsepower with cars. If we, all horses are different. Shetland pony, Clydesdale, they're slightly different. Racehorse. But if we can say that's an average, then you can calculate, then you can compare, these two things: a machine with a horse, in this case, a robot with a manual picker. So I want us to establish that benchmark of human picks per day. And then we can talk about, then we can show how, you can look at a system and say this is a 5 picks per day machine for the price of 2 workers. Then it makes economic sense. But if we don't measure what we're doing, we're never going to be able to evaluate whether this is worthwhile or not. So I think that's my big ask. Let's measure how well we're doing at the moment, because from my inexperienced perspective, we're still talking about tons of waste and ton bales, and we're not being granular enough on the manual picking piece.
Yeah, quite often, but I see with it, it's all about throughput. It's tons per hour or whatever, but quite often it's not even. They don't take into account the accuracy, so you can ramp through the tonnage, but the accuracy at the end is not very good. So it's like, and then you end up reprocessing material. But totally agree with you about the tonnage, because we've been banging that drum for ages about the waste comp work. So we know roughly what one sorter can do in a day, and it's not a huge amount. It's not a huge amount in terms of weight, because most stuff's quite light. So you've got a lot of movements to. We've never actually played it back to, how many individual sorts is that. So we've got a figure in our head of how many kilograms per day, but we've never actually thought the average weight of the material is X, and therefore, the number of different sorts that person's making is Y. We've never actually got there with it. But the number of times we'll get local authorities giving us, massive tonnages to try and sort. And then when you go back and say, do you realise this is going to require, a team of 12 or 15 at a cost? They're like, oh, maybe we can't afford that anymore. And it's like, no, I like that one. You've got me thinking whether we need to actually work back our kilogram per day figure back down to a number of sorts per day.
Yeah. How many picks?
What we need is like a camera, like a video camera, and then we can just do that for the day, and then speed it up and count all the amount of times they walk from one place to another.
Yeah. Counting is in the DNA of a robot. It does it anyway.
There's tech that does that. Yeah.
The amount of steps you do, because you kind of think your waste composition hours you're standing around, but actually the amount of steps you do from one sorting box to the next is quite high, actually.
And so it's about making sure they're genuine picks. So, for instance, the grippers, like I think I said earlier, it detects when it's got something between its claws, between its fingers, and then it detects it again when it's over the bin, and then it detects it when it drops the object. So it's a guaranteed pick.
So it's not like the arcades one where you pick up the teddy and then it drops before you get it into the thing.
You've got to count the teddies going through the chute, not the amount of times the gripper does this.
Picks up the teddy, yes. Yeah. So we're always looking for people to move into the waste industry because we think, and it's an exciting business. There's lots going on, and you're kind of like scenario from what you were just saying earlier to say that actually the waste industry is quite exciting. What advice would you give the younger generation coming into the sector if you were like, coming out as an art graduate? How would you move from art graduate to waste management business? What's your sort of advice?
Well, it clearly links to circular economy, environmental protection, saving the planet. So there's a top-down big incentive to be involved, and I think there are places like what the guys at Ben are building at Glenfarg. There's energy from waste. There's hydrogen production. There's the solar farm. There's the wind turbines. When you see all of that together, then it really makes sense, and it's quite exciting. And I think to be able to work somewhere like that, where you might get experience of working with it all and understanding why it matters, the impact you're having, and that this is setting up how it should be, that I think is inspiring. So I hope I'm sure they are going to do trips and get kids out there just to see this. That it's not you're not just sorting rubbish. You're saving the world. You're saving the planet.
Yeah, it's all about how you manage it, what you're going to do with it, and and why it's required and why it's needed. Yeah.
I like that. I was quite interested when I was asking you there, Nick, about the number of times we're on sort of green jobs things and so on, and quite often my response is it's not a green job, it's just an essential job that needs done. And we seem to want to give it a green banner, partly maybe because we get funding or whatever, but at the end of the day, all these jobs need done one way or the other. Okay, well, thank you very much. We've exhausted our extensive question set for you, Nick. Hopefully that wasn't too stressful for you, since you're a new entrant into the waste. We can give you honorary membership of the waste sector now you've been on the podcast. And we're quite happy sharing. We always share a wee email and newsletter and stuff, so quite happy sharing a bit of the company information about the tech and things. And if you do find that Dragon's Den post, we can share that as well.
I don't think that's something Nick wants to share. Yeah. No, thank you, Nick. That was really interesting. It's kind of answered some questions and got me thinking so much about what could be achieved, which is quite amazing.
Good, thank you. Well, thank you very much for asking me. As I said, it's an experience being on a podcast where I know the audience, every single member of the audience knows more about this industry than I do. So
I wouldn't worry.
In fairness, that was not our intention, Nick. Because our intention with this was to try and get the big bad world of the public out there about waste management. But I do know that quite a lot of our listeners are waste management people, so. We all need to get better at sharing it and try and educate some of the public out there, because I honestly think a lot of the public would be fascinated and don't have a clue this type of work you're involved in is happening in the waste sector. I'm pretty sure most people don't know that. So thank you for your time, much appreciated.
Thank you.
In the heart of air where the echoes ring, there's a place that fights the chaos out beyond it sings. They're the warriors for the earth, fighting every day. An environmental consultancy leading the way. They train the fighters, they sharpen the blades, battling the waste that pollutes and degrades. With knowledge as their weapon, they educate and train. I'll be an environmental, breaking the chain. From the mountains to the seas, they spread the call, aiming for a future where the world will not fall. With sustainability as their creed, they march on. I'll be on environmental.